In the Serapeum's underground gallery, in the semi-darkness undisturbed by sunlight for over 2,000 years, there's a mark on the inner wall of a granite box weighing nearly 100 tons. Not a crack, not a chip. A spiral groove, a fraction of a millimeter deep, running at a uniform pitch across the surface of pink Aswan granite. This mark hasn't been included in any official catalog. It's not studied in Egyptology departments. It's not written about in textbooks. But it exists, and it says more than all the hieroglyphs in this necropolis combined. Because a spiral groove with a uniform pitch on material with a hardness of 6 to 7 on the Mohs scale isn't the mark of a copper chisel. Copper is a 3 on the same scale. Scratching granite with copper is like cutting glass with wet paper. But it's not even a matter of hardness. It's a matter of geometry. The groove runs along the inner surface of the container in an area where maneuvering space for any hand tool is minimal. The angle of the cutter's entry, the pressure, the uniformity of the step, all point to a rotary mechanism. A tool moved not by the hand of a craftsman, but by something more stable, more precise, less susceptible to fatigue. Modern engineers working with granite recognize this mark instantly. It is the mark of a tubular drill with an abrasive feed, or ultrasonic machining, or something that has no name yet in the standard classification. But it certainly has no place in the Bronze Age. Egyptology ignores this groove, not because it is difficult to see, but because it cannot be explained without upending the entire established chronology. One spiral mark on granite, and thousands of pages of academic papers lose their foundation. That is precisely why this groove is not a detail. It is a door, an entry point to a question that is significantly larger than a single stone box at Saqqara. The question is, what level of technology was lost and deliberately forgotten beneath the sands of Egypt? Today, the word labyrinth evokes images of dead ends, tangled corridors, a trap for the Minotaur. But this is an accretion. Cultural noise accumulated over centuries of retelling. If you remove this noise and return to the original source, something entirely different is revealed. Herodotus of Halicarnassus, in the 5th century BC, uses the word labyrinth not as a metaphor. He uses it as a proper name, the name of a specific structure he saw in person, in which he walked the halls, counted the columns, and assessed the masonry. And this is what he writes: the man who stood at the foot of the Great Pyramid of Giza and saw it not in a photograph but point blank, raising his head, this structure surpasses the pyramids, not comparably, not as majestic, surpasses. What do you have to see to write such a thing? Already knowing the pyramids. But Herodotus is not the only witness. Strabo describes the labyrinth a century and a half later, Diodorus Siculus even later. Pliny the Elder adds his own details. Manetho, an Egyptian priest who wrote in Greek, mentions it as a fact that requires no proof. 5 authors, different eras, different purposes, different languages of description, but they all point to the same place, near Lake Moeris, in the Fayum Depression, and they all agree on one thing: the scale of this structure defies conventional categories. It is not a temple, not a palace, not a fortress. None of the 5 can find a familiar word for it. Strabo describes a sectorial structure, 27 separate blocks corresponding to the nomes of Egypt, each with its own halls, courtyards, and passages. This is not a description of a sanctuary. It is a description of an infrastructural hub with a modular layout. Today, Egyptology categorizes these texts as exaggerations of ancient travelers. 5 independent authors, separated by centuries, exaggerate identically in the same details about the same place. Statistically, this is not an exaggeration. This is eyewitness testimony. Herodotus didn't leave impressions. He left numbers. 1,500 rooms above ground, 1,500 below, 12 covered courtyards arranged along a single axis, 6 facing north, 6 south, monolithic stone ceilings of the halls, passages leading from the courtyards to rooms, from the rooms to galleries, from the galleries to new courtyards, and all of this is a single continuous structure, not a complex of separate buildings, but a single edifice. 3,000 rooms. To comprehend this figure, you need a point of reference. The Palace of Versailles, a symbol of human excess, contains about 700 rooms. The Pentagon, the largest office building on the planet, has about 1,000. Herodotus describes a structure 3 times larger than the Pentagon, built of stone rather than concrete and steel, in an era officially dated to the Middle Kingdom, a time when brick pyramids with clay mortar are considered the pinnacle of engineering. But the most significant thing isn't the quantity, it's the duplication. 1,500 above, 1,500 below. Mirrored architecture. Herodotus was allowed to the upper level, where he wandered for hours, and, by his own admission, had difficulty finding his way back. He was not allowed down. The priests said that kings and sacred crocodiles were buried there. This explanation settled the matter for the 5th century B.C., but not for the 21st, because in all the centuries of excavations in the Hawara region, not a single royal burial has been discovered in the underground levels, nor have crocodiles. But something else has been discovered. 1,500 underground chambers, not an extension of a temple, not a basement. This is a complete replica of the above-ground level sunk into the bedrock. In engineering, such a solution has only one rational explanation: redundancy for a critical system. They duplicate what must never stop. They duplicate server rooms, command centers, and communication nodes. No one duplicates the prayer room. The question Egyptology doesn't ask is simple. What function of these 3,000 rooms was so important that it required a complete underground mirror? The year is 1,888. A man who would later be called the father of scientific archaeology arrives in Hawara. William Matthew Flinders. Petrie isn't looking for gold. He's not looking for mummies. He's looking for walls, foundations, masonry lines. His tools are a tape measure, a theodolite, a notebook with a millimeter grid. He measures everything that can be measured and records everything that can be recorded. This is precisely what makes his discovery in Hawara so inconvenient for everyone who comes after. Petrie doesn't find the entire labyrinth. By that time, the above-ground portion has already been destroyed by millennia of quarrying. Locals have used the blocks as building material for centuries, but the foundation remains, and the foundation is a death sentence, because the foundation cannot be underestimated. Petrie measures it meter by meter, day after day, in the dust and heat of the Fayum Basin. The result? The foundation area exceeds 70,000 square meters. By comparison, the combined area of the temple complexes of Karnak and Luxor, the largest religious buildings in Egypt, is smaller than what Petrie plotted in his drawings. This is not a temple. This is not a palace. This is the scale of an industrial district. Petrie records fragments of polished granite columns, fragments of white limestone cladding, fitted with a precision he describes in the restrained language of a Victorian scholar. But behind the restraint, one senses a shock. He was accustomed to the precision of the Giza pyramids, but here, in these remains, he sees the same signature, the same tolerances, the same level of workmanship applied to a completely different type of construction. Not a vertical tower, but a horizontal network. Petrie publishes his results. The Academy takes them into account. And nothing. No follow-up expeditions, no attempts to uncover the underground levels, no discussions about the purpose of a structure of such scale. Petrie's drawings are archived, where they will lie for more than a century. The most precise archaeologist of his time measured what neither his contemporaries nor their successors wanted to see. The Fayum oasis is not an oasis in the traditional sense. It's a geological anomaly, a tectonic depression that sank below the Nile Valley, forming a natural basin where water accumulated for millennia. In ancient times, Lake Moeris was located here, a gigantic body of water connected to the Nile by an artificial canal. The very existence of this canal is a separate question, which Egyptologists prefer to resolve with the word irrigation and move on. Today, Lake Karun remains of Moeris, shallow, saline, and shifted northwest. But the water hasn't gone away. It has receded. Groundwater levels in the Hawara region are abnormally high, and this is precisely what turned the underground levels of the labyrinth into a sealed safe. Water, a paradoxical preservative. On the surface, stone erodes. The wind carries abrasive sand. The sun creates temperature fluctuations of tens of degrees per day, and salt crystallizes in the pores, tearing the structure from within. But underwater, in a stable temperature, without access to oxygen or ultraviolet light, limestone and granite remain virtually unchanged. Chemical erosion in the mineral-rich groundwater of the Fayum is minimal. What would crumble to sand on the surface in 500 years can stand underwater for 5,000, with virtually no loss of structural integrity. This means something simple. If the 1,500 underground chambers described by Herodotus truly exist, and the foundations measured by Petrie and ground-penetrating radar data from the 21st century indicate that they do, then they are highly likely preserved, not as ruins, not as debris, as submerged but structurally intact spaces, walls, ceilings, corridors, perhaps even the chamber's contents. All of this lies beneath several meters of soil and water, preserved by the very geology of the Fayum Depression. Lake Moeris doesn't simply preserve, it waits, with the patience that only water can muster, filling every crevice, every hall, every corridor, with an even, motionless silence. 2008. A team of researchers from Ghent University, led by a geoarchaeologist, receives permission to conduct a non-invasive scan of the site in Hawara. No excavations, just instruments, ground-penetrating radar, and magnetometry. Two methods that don't lie, don't interpret, and have no academic ambitions. They record the density, conductivity, and reflection of signals from underground structures. And this is what they record. Beneath a layer of sand and alluvial soil, at a depth of 1.5 to several meters, lies a massive grid of regular anomalies, right angles, parallel wall lines, closed chamber contours, corridors intersecting at geometrically precise angles. Nature doesn't construct right angles. Nature doesn't construct parallel walls at equal intervals. What the ground-penetrating radar revealed is an unmistakably artificial structure, and its location matches what Petrie measured 120 years ago, and what Herodotus described 25 centuries ago. 3 sources, an ancient text, a Victorian archaeologist's drawings, and 21st century digital equipment, point to the same point. The data is published. A scientific journal accepts the article. The results are available to any researcher with access to academic databases. And then, silence. The Egyptian authorities refuse to issue an excavation permit. A follow-up expedition receives no funding. Not a single major archaeological organization takes up the topic. The data is not challenged. To do that, they would have to conduct their own scans and obtain a different result. The data is not refuted. To do that, they would have to dig up the ground and prove that it is empty. None of this happens. The data simply ceases to be mentioned, not rejected, not accepted, dissolved into silence. Ground-penetrating radar has detected an underground megastructure at the point all history has pointed to, and the world has responded in the only way that requires neither courage nor budget. He looked away. The labyrinth at Hawara is not an isolated case. It is part of a pattern that permeates all of Egypt and beyond, if you look not at hieroglyphs, but at stone. The Serapeum at Saqqara. Subterranean galleries, cut into the limestone massif, stretch for hundreds of meters. 24 granite boxes are installed in niches carved into the walls. Each one is a monolith. The body weighs approximately 70 tons. The lid weighs another 30. In total, about 100 tons of solid Aswan granite, transported 800 kilometers and lowered into an underground corridor whose width barely exceeds the dimensions of the box itself. The problem cannot be solved using known Bronze Age technologies. There is no room for levers, no room for rollers. There is no way to turn the block in the niche, the ceiling of which hangs mere centimeters from the lid. But the boxes are in place, polished on the inside to a mirror finish, with angles set at a perfect 90 degrees, with lids fitted so precisely that a blade wouldn't fit between them and the body of the box. The official version: these are sarcophagi for sacred Apis bulls, ritual burials. But none of the opened boxes contained bones, organic remains, or traces of embalming. They were empty, or cleaned. Abydos, Upper Egypt. The Osireion is a megalithic structure made of granite blocks weighing between 100 and 200 tons. It lies significantly below the foundations of the Temple of Seti I, who, according to the official version, stratigraphy allows for no ambiguity. What lies deeper is older. The Osireion is older than the temple above it. How much older is a question that evokes silence in any audience. Malta, Hal Saflieni, Hypogeum. An underground complex, carved into limestone on 3 levels, reaching a depth of over 10 meters. The walls are not rough. They are crafted with a soft, almost organic precision, creating smooth transitions between planes. But the main thing is the acoustics. Certain chambers of the hypogeum are tuned to a frequency of 110 Hz. not approximately. Precisely. This frequency resonates in the bone structure of the skull and, according to neuroacoustic studies, affects the prefrontal cortex of the brain. Someone designed these chambers as resonators, not just randomly cut them out, designed them with an understanding of how sound waves interact with enclosed spaces. 3 objects, 3 geographies, 1 signature, underground placement, megalithic scale, precision of craftsmanship inexplicable within the framework of the ascribed eras, and a complete lack of a clear answer to the question, why? The Serapeum, the Osireion, and the Hypogeum are not temples hidden underground. These are engineering units whose function has been lost, but the stone remains. Granite isn't just a hard stone, it's a crystalline rock composed of quartz, feldspar, and mica, fused together under incredible pressure deep within the Earth's crust. Its hardness on the Mohs scale is 6 to 7. For comparison, hardened steel is 6.5. Machining granite means cutting a material comparable in hardness to the tool used to cut it. This is the task accomplished by modern industry with diamond blades, silicon carbide, and CNC machines. Official Egyptology offers a different solution: copper tubes, sand as an abrasive, and endless patience. Copper is a 3 on the Mohs scale. It's softer than window glass. Now, the data. The interior surfaces of the Serapeum's granite boxes are machined to a tolerance of less than 50 microns, 1/20th of a millimeter. The thickness of a human hair is 70 microns. The tolerances achieved in these boxes are finer than a hair's breadth. The flatness of the walls is maintained within 2/100ths of a millimeter per meter of length. The angles are 90 degrees, with no visible deviation. The parallelism of opposite walls is within the same limits as the flatness. This is not a level of artisanship. This is not a level of mastery. This is a level of machine calibration, reproducible in modern conditions only on coordinate measuring machines. And all this is inside the box, in a confined space, where the distance between the walls does not allow even a short arm to swing. How did the operator control the process? What tool removed the material layer by layer, achieving optical smoothness over an area of several square meters? Egyptology answers this question with silence, not denial, silence. Because denial would require an alternative explanation, and there is none. There are only grooves in the granite. There is flatness. There is tolerance. Physics is independent of chronology. 50 microns remains 50 microns, no matter what millennium the textbook places them in. Herodotus was no engineer, but he left behind a detail that haunts even the most ardent engineer. 1,500 rooms above ground and 1,500 below. Not a basement, not a storage subspace, a complete mirror image of the entire above-ground level, sunk into the bedrock. This detail is usually lost in the general flow of description. It's mentioned in passing as an architectural oddity. But if you stop and ask one question, why, the familiar picture begins to crack. Duplication in architecture is never accidental. It always comes at a cost. Each underground chamber is more than just a mirror image of the above-ground one. It involves tons of extracted rock. It reinforces the vaults. It drains groundwater. It provides ventilation. It involves the logistics of building in a confined space, where every cubic meter of stone must be brought to the surface through a limited number of passages. Doubling such an object means almost doubling the cost of the entire project. No civilization does this for the sake of symbolism. In modern engineering, mirrored redundancy is used only when the system has no margin for failure. Command centers are backed up. Data centers, communication hubs, space station life support systems. The logic is always the same. If the primary circuit fails, the backup takes over without any loss of time. This isn't a luxury. It's a cold calculation dictated by the criticality of the process. No one backs up a library. No one builds an underground replica of a throne room. No one duplicates a prayer room, because stopping prayer doesn't entail a systemic catastrophe. But someone has duplicated 500 rooms, entirely, underground, in rock. This decision speaks of a function whose nature precludes interruption, a process so important that it was protected from any superficial impact, war, earthquake, flood, time. What process exactly took place in these 3,000 rooms is unknown, but the very fact of redundancy rules out everything the official version suggests. A temple doesn't require a backup circuit, but what requires it is not a temple. There's a word in Egyptology that works like anesthesia. It doesn't explain. It puts the question to sleep before it even begins. That word is ceremonial. 100-ton granite box, polished to an optical flatness inside, sits in an underground tunnel, impossible to reach by known methods. A ceremonial vessel, a structure covering over 70,000 square meters with 3,000 rooms and a mirrored subterranean level. A mortuary temple, a ceremonial complex, chambers carved into the rock and tuned to a resonant frequency of 110 hertz. A ritual space. Every time an object doesn't fit within the accepted framework, it's labeled, and the question is closed, unresolved. Closed. This isn't an explanation. It's a refusal to explain, couched in academic language. A replacement of cause and effect with an intonation of confidence. The mechanism works flawlessly because it requires no conspiracy. Conspiracy presupposes coordination, secrecy, and intent. None of that exists here. There is something more enduring, institutional inertia. A professor inherits his mentor's categories. A graduate student does not challenge the professor, not out of fear, but because the categories are already built into the language in which he thinks. Grant committees fund research that expands the existing model, not that which destroys it. Reviewers reject papers that challenge basic assumptions, not out of malice, but because such papers fail to meet the methodological standards of the discipline, standards that are themselves a product of the very model that cannot be questioned. The circle closes. The system reproduces itself with a precision that the builders of the Serapeum would have envied. And the Labyrinth, the largest structure in the ancient world, according to those who have seen it, fits into a single catalogue entry. The mortuary temple of Amenemhat III, 12th dynasty. Period. 3,000 rooms, an underground mirror, a foundation bigger than Karnak, and one line. Not a secret, not a conspiracy, a blind spot that has learned to protect itself. A thought experiment, simple, almost childish in form, but devastating in its consequences. Imagine a next-generation Mars rover scanning the surface in the Hellas Planitia region, detects an anomaly. Beneath the regolith lies a regular structure. Right angles, parallel walls, closed chamber contours arranged in a modular pattern. The area is over 70,000 square meters. A depth scan reveals a second level, a mirror image of the first. The total number of isolated spaces is approximately 3,000. Surface treatments indicate tolerances unattainable by natural erosion. No traces of biological activity. No written sources. Only geometry, stone, and precision. The question is, how will the global scientific community react? The answer requires no imagination. It is obvious. The front page of every publication on the planet, emergency meetings of science academies, review of space agency budgets, Nobel committees in a panic, an unambiguous classification, artificial structure, evidence of a technological civilization, the greatest discovery in the history of the species. And now, the coordinates. 29 degrees north latitude, 31 degrees east longitude. Not Mars, Earth, the Fayum Basin, an hour's drive from Cairo. Same data, same geometry, same 3,000 chambers, same subterranean level, same precision stonework, 5 ancient testimonies, Petrie's measurements, ground-penetrating radar confirmation from 2008, and the classification, mortuary temple of a Middle Kingdom pharaoh. The only variable that changed between the Millennium sensation and the catalog entry is not the data, not the method, not the scale of the object, the coordinates. On Mars, a structure of this type proves the existence of an intelligent civilization. On Earth, it proves the piety of a 12th dynasty pharaoh. This test reveals not a lack of data. There is enough data. It reveals a lack of assumptions. Science, ready to accept any anomaly on an alien planet, proves incapable of accepting the same anomaly under its own feet, because the Martian discovery expands our understanding of the world, while the Egyptian one destroys it. On Mars, there's nothing to lose. In Hawara, a century and a half of academic tradition, thousands of careers, tens of thousands of publications, and the very architecture of a discipline built on the assumption that everything is already largely understood, are at risk. The labyrinth isn't a riddle whose answer is lost. It's an answer no one can accept. Beneath the sands of the Fayum Depression, beneath a layer of alluvial soil, beneath a layer of groundwater saturated with 40 centuries' worth of minerals lies something. This something isn't hidden. It's simply there, deep enough to be out of the way, close enough to be found. Herodotus saw it, and found no words except to say that it surpassed the pyramids. Strabo described it, with the precision of a geographer recording not a miracle, but a fact. Petrie measured it, centimeter by centimeter, in heat that melted the paint on his instruments. Ground-penetrating radar recorded it, dispassionately, in numbers, without a single attempt at interpretation. 4 pieces of evidence separated by 25 centuries, an ancient text, a Victorian drawing, a digital signal, and all 4 point to the same point, a point where no one digs, not because there is nothing to look for, but because the discovery could be such that the old map of the world will cease to function. Right angles beneath the sand won't disappear from neglect. 50-micron tolerances on the walls of granite boxes won't become coarser from academic silence. The area of a foundation won't shrink because it's listed as a single line in a catalog. Resonance at a frequency of 110 Hz won't cease to act on the prefrontal cortex because it's labeled ritual. All of this is in place, patiently, indifferent to opinions, chronologies, and quarries. Stone takes its time. Furrows in granite will outlive any academic tradition. Perhaps in 100 years, the water level in the Fayum will shift. Technology will allow non-invasive scanning to depths inaccessible today. Someone will descend into the corridors last seen by the priests who rejected Herodotus. Perhaps something will be discovered inside that will rewrite every textbook in every department at every university in the world. Perhaps emptiness. But the emptiness of 3,000 rooms, machine-cut to perfection and mirrored by underground mirrors, is also an answer. There is a signal. It doesn't scream. It makes no sound at all. It is etched into the granite's crystal lattice, encoded in the geometry of the walls, imprinted with intolerances that leave no room for chance. It comes from beneath the earth, through water, through rock, through centuries of constructed indifference. It demands no faith. It requires no myth. It asks no worship. It simply is, like a furrow in the wall of a granite chamber in the Serapeum, like a right angle beneath the sands of Hawara, like the silence in the hall where a question should have been asked but wasn't. Humanity stands on the surface and looks up to the stars, to Mars, to distant galaxies, hoping to find a signal from there. And it is below, underfoot, patient, smooth, waiting, like ants on a microprocessor who called it a hill, unaware that the dark channels within it weren't cracks, not capillaries of rock, but a pattern, architecture, a message from those who built not for the gods, not for the dead, not for eternity, but for those who would one day be honest enough to look down,